When it comes to the project, it seems that this is a priority over everybody else's safety.
Tonight, 2 First Nations set up a roadblock stopping workers from entering a Manitoba Hydro worksite.
So you go into the classroom, there's no books for the first year. Second year you do have more theory.
And a counseling education program is launched in the north. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Ottawa's COVID update has an American slant today, with Justin Trudeau announcing the Canada-US border will remain closed to non-essential traffic. But APTN's Todd Lamoran begins with the federal response to Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, who has announced he will cancel the Keystone XL pipeline if elected.
During his press conference, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer called Joe Biden's promise very concerning.
We believe that Justin Trudeau should be doing everything he can to encourage his friends in the Democratic Party to look at the economic benefits for both countries and the science behind the environmental analysis that have led to this project's approval.
If built, Keystone XL, the line in yellow, would carry bitumen from Alberta through Montana and South Dakota to Steel City, Nebraska. It was rejected by former President Barack Obama, but revived by Donald Trump. During today's COVID-19 briefing, Prime Minister Trudeau reiterated his support for the pipeline.
And we will continue to work with whatever government gets elected in the United States to impress upon them how important Canada is as a secure and reliable supply of energy that they require, even as we move forward to a different future.
Keystone XL construction was halted last month by a federal judge in Montana until requirements for the Endangered Species Act are met. Meanwhile, Trudeau announced a further 30-day closure of the Canada-US border and was asked if that will be extended again.
It was the right thing to further extend by 30 days our closure of the Canada-US border to travelers other than essential services and goods. But we will continue to watch carefully what's happening elsewhere in the world and around us as we make decisions on next steps.
Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Theresa Tam, said what happens in Canada with COVID-19 will determine when the border is opened.
We have to cautiously lift measures within our borders first, just to see slowly what actually happens, because we want to see that the cases are still suppressed. You're still going to manage, detect, and clamp down on any new sparks that might come up. That's really, really important.
Today's announcement means the border will be closed at least until June 21st. Todd Lamoran, APTN National News, Ottawa.
There are still no cases of COVID-19 in Nunavut, but 2 cases announced in the south today are hitting home for Nunavut residents. The territorial government announced that a worker in an Ottawa seniors facility tested positive for COVID-19, a seniors home with many Nunavut residents. They also announced that a Nunavut resident in the south on medical travel has also tested positive. The government won't say where the patient traveled to or where they stayed while there. Nunavut's Chief Public Health Officer explains why.
We are not concerned that this raises the risk for other Nunavummiut, and so because of that, we are not going to discuss the issues or discuss the details of this case. If we find, as part of the contact tracing, that it does represent a threat to other Nunavummiut, then we will disclose it at that time.
And over the weekend, more barbs exchanged between the Mohawks of Kanesatake and their neighbors in Oka. The Grand Chief is calling on the Quebec government to support the road checks still in place, despite a legal order, and mounting pressure from the Oka mayor. Lindsay Richardson with more on that.
Business as usual on Monday for checkpoint workers stationed at Kanesatake's perimeter, undeterred by a cease and desist order signed by neighbors in Oka, ordering them to lift their so-called illegal barricades and let traffic through.
I'll start with our favorite topic, Mayor Pascal Cavillon.
Grand Chief Serge Simon addressed the recent fallout, saying the community won't bow to outside pressure. Ganasatake responded to Quevillon with their own legal letter. And Simon says a poll conducted among residents of both areas showed majority support for the road checks.
It should give Mr. Mayor a little bit of pause. He should be thinking about his actions when he tries to intimidate or tries to take legal action for any reason.
Simon is taking his concerns to the Quebec government. Nearby attraction Oka Park, closed since the pandemic struck, is set to reopen to the public this week, although no one outside Oka was consulted. In a letter to the Premier, Simon said, quote, "I'm sure they will survive one season deprived of tourism. Otherwise, our most vulnerable may not." So far, no response.
Bonjour, Auquois.
Quevillon, meanwhile, has much to say. Over the weekend, he alleged one Ganasatake road worker has a criminal history, and he told APTN Oka residents are uneasy about the civilian patrols, even less when they have a criminal past and ask for IDs, he said. Quevillon also aired a grievance with the federal government, specifically Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller. Miller is only adding fuel to the fire between our two communities by funding these illegal road checks, Quevillon says.
Mr. Mayor, I wish you would just stop.
Simon insists the fight against COVID-19 is not political and insists that Quevillon's behavior could affect the common good.
History, I think, is going to judge you very poorly on your actions during this event.
APTN reached out to Indigenous Services Canada for comment, but didn't hear back by deadline. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Mohawk Territory of Ganasatake.
Two First Nations in Manitoba have set up blockades to prevent workers from entering a construction camp in the north. Approximately 1,200 workers from across Canada are expected to arrive at the Keeyask generating station project today. But the communities involved say this poses a risk for the COVID-19 virus to enter their territory. Brittany Hobson has more.
Leadership from Keeyask Cree Nation have set up what they are calling a lockdown along Highway 280 in northern Manitoba. The goal is to block Manitoba Hydro workers from entering the Keeyask generating station construction camp. On Tuesday, more than 1,000 employees are set to make their way to the camp. Nathan Nekaway is a band counselor at Keeyask. He says the move puts First Nations at risk.
We're here to protect our community, and we're here to protect other communities. And all in all, we're here to protect northern Manitoba from COVID-19.
The community set up the blockade over the Victoria Day weekend. By Monday, Manitoba courts issued an injunction to cease all blockades at Hydro's request.
But I don't understand why these people in the southern areas are making these calls and doing the threats with an injunction. And to me, an injunction does not apply in a time period like today. COVID-19 is here.
Keeyask is one of the 4 First Nations in partnership with the project. They've been calling a halt to construction during the pandemic. Manitoba Hydro initially scaled back its crew and kept employees at the camp for up to 8 weeks. They say they have developed a plan to ensure regular work rotations can resume safely. Nekaway says the First Nations were never a part of the planning.
That pandemic plan was not shared with any of us, the KCN communities, which is kind of like not abiding by the partnership of the project.
In a statement, Hydro says the plan was endorsed by the province. Dr. Brent Rusin confirmed this in his daily briefing Tuesday.
Those people being brought in from other jurisdictions are required to self-isolate for 14 days and receive a negative test before they go up there. So certainly that is fitting with the public health guidance.
Manitoba Kiwetinawe Ogimakanak Grand Chief Garrison Sati says it sends the wrong message.
When it comes to the project, it seems that this is a priority over everybody else's safety.
A second blockade was set up in Fox Lake Cree Nation on Tuesday. Keeyask will continue with its own. Nekaway says RCMP officers have visited the site, but have yet to enforce the injunction. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Coming up later this week, Tina House will bring us the story about a mother trying to save her daughter, who's an addict on Vancouver's downtown east side, from getting COVID-19. As we head to break, here's a preview of that story.
It's another rainy day in Vancouver, and Mavis and her friend Marlene Jack are out once again looking for Faith. It's something she's had to do over the years. Because of Faith's addiction, she doesn't always stay in contact. Except this time, there's more of an urgency. With the COVID-19 pandemic, she's scared and worried for her safety, especially living here on Vancouver's downtown east side, where social distancing orders are not being followed.
She does have a lot of mental health issues, and she needs to be in a safe environment like that, especially with the pandemic.
Here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, 17 under sunny skies for Halifax, 15 and sunny in Charlottetown, 2 with snow for Nain, 12 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, 23 under the sun in Montreal, 15 in Saguenay, 18 in Toronto, sunny, and 23 for Ottawa, 21 in Thunder Bay and Wawa, 26 in Sioux Lookout, plus 2 in Churchill, 14 for Thompson, sunny, and 29 in Winnipeg, Gimli, and Dauphin, 27 in Regina, showers, and 23 for Saskatoon, showers and 18 in Meadow Lake, 15 with rain in La Ronge. Welcome back. The Navajo Nation has now surpassed all states in the U.S. in per capita confirmed cases of COVID-19. For an update on the situation and to explain how the virus spread is affecting its citizens, we're joined by Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez. President Nez, thanks for taking some time for us. The Navajo Nation declared a public health emergency early on in March, but the number of cases has continued to rise. Can you explain how this crisis has unfolded?
Hey, Dennis. Well, let me first of all give you the data that we have received from last evening. Total tests that have been given here on the Navajo Nation, 25,682. 4,071 have tested positive. 19,964 have tested negative, and the rest are still pending. We have 142 deaths here on the Navajo Nation, and we also are starting to track the recovery numbers. 928 of our Navajo people have recovered from COVID-19 here on the Navajo Nation. And I think the reason why a lot of our folks here are catching the virus is that we live in a food desert here on the Navajo Nation. We only have 11 supermarkets. We have a lot of gas stations, but we only have 11 supermarkets, and everybody goes to these 11 supermarkets to get their food and their supplies. And we see a lot of that spread happening there at the shopping centers, as well as in the border towns, those big box businesses like Walmart, Sam's Club, and then they bring it back onto the Navajo Nation. You got multiple generation of family members, as you know how we do it here in Native America, living under one household, and we like it like that because we want to take care of our elder, grandma, grandpa, our nully, and then our aunts and uncles sometimes stay with us. And so if one person catches COVID-19 and they go back into that multi-generational home, we are seeing now a spread of COVID within the family. And back to the data gathering, 25,682 that have been tested. We here on the Navajo Nation have tested more of our population than any other state throughout the United States of America, even more than the state of New York. State of New York over the weekend said that they have tested a little bit over 7% of their population. Navajo Nation, 11.5% we have tested here. And of course, if you test more, the results will end up more positive and more negative results.
That is an incredible amount of testing. President Nez, what are your most pressing concerns right now?
Well, the present concerns that we have is that what are we going to do with the $600 million that came from the CARES Act? You know, the Department of Treasury up in Washington, D.C. gave us some guidelines. It's for the immediate needs. Of course, we need personal protection equipment. Of course, we need food and supplies. We need those immediate expenditures from the $600 million, but we also need to begin to plan for the future of this virus. We have no cure, no vaccine right now for coronavirus. So scientists and healthcare professionals have said that they may see an uptick in cases in the winter. So how do we utilize this money to fend off coronavirus? We are wanting to utilize these dollars to get water to 30 to 40% of our citizens that don't have running water here in the Navajo Nation. If we're going to be able to push this virus off our nation, then we should provide running water to our citizens, as well as broadband. We need broadband telecommunications because we need to get the message out. During this public health crisis here on Navajo, we realized that not everybody can get the information, the up-to-date information, to those citizens that are living way in rural parts of our nation. And the other is housing. I just mentioned that there are multiple generations of family members living under one roof. So we want to be able to develop housing in our communities so that we can take maybe the young families and have them have their place for themselves, as well as the elderly and our veterans out there. So we want to be able to use the $600 million to the fullest to begin to prepare for the immediate needs and also the future of COVID-19 on our lands, and even future pandemics that maybe we haven't heard of yet. And we have to prepare for that.
President Nez, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there, but wishing you all the best, and do keep in touch.
All right, thank you. God bless you. We're all in this together. A lot of warriors out there in Indian country. Keep up the good work.
The United Nations is concerned about the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on Indigenous people worldwide. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous People issued a statement yesterday saying communities that have achieved autonomy and self-government are faring better against the virus. Jose Francisco Calizi recommended that governments around the world allow Indigenous people to develop their own plans to protect their communities. Well, Dr. James Makokis believes the world is going to be a different place following the COVID-19 pandemic. He's our guest on an all-new episode of Face to Face, airing tonight right after the news. Dr. Makokis believes some post-pandemic changes could be for the better.
In the overall picture of how this has changed our planet, you know, we see some of the positives that have happened with reduced air travel, reduced ground travel, and how people are more open to walking or biking and being less dependent on fossil fuels. So I hope that this continues, you know, without the worry of getting COVID, but a lot of the positives that have happened because of the pandemic, that people don't forget about those too.
Still to come, the efforts underway to get more Indigenous counselors on the job in the NWT. Stay with us. Here's the rest of Wednesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 20 for Fort McMurray, showers and 19 in Grand Prairie. 22 with rain for Medicine Hat, 14 and showers for Calgary. Rain and 17 in Vancouver, 16 and showers in Victoria and Campbell River. Rain and 9 in Fort Nelson, showers and 11 for Dease Lake. Plus 9 in Old Crow, 11 with some rain for Whitehorse. 6 and showers in Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 8 in Yellowknife. Minus 3 for Sax Harbor, plus 3 in Colville Lake. Minus 2 with snow in Repulse Bay and Chesterfield, 0 in Baker Lake. Minus 2 with snow in Resolute, 4 below in Clyde River. Welcome back. It's long been argued that students should not have to leave the north to get a better education, and that there's a need for local wellness workers in communities. Now a new counseling certification program in Yellowknife will do both. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs tells us how.
When Jean Erasmus trained with Indigenous Health Services, she had one burning question.
I asked them how many counselors there were in all 3 territories, and they told me there was 54 counselors, and I was the only Indigenous one working with residential school survivors and their families. So I said, wow, okay, there's a need here.
Soon after, her husband Roy Erasmus received designation as a counselor. They were running their own counseling business for a few years when they decided to approach the very school with the very program they had graduated from, Rhodes Wellness College in Vancouver. The goal? To train 25 Indigenous counselors in a diploma program, but this time have the courses delivered in the Northwest Territories.
So you go into the classroom, there's no books for the first year. Second year you do have more theory, but it's all experience. So you're learning all the concepts of counseling and coaching and group facilitation, and next thing you know, you're using your experience.
Jean and Roy's big takeaway, transformational healing.
I basically had to learn how to cry. And through this process, I did. And it's amazing because, you know, you're taught not to show your emotions, and this is to show your emotions.
Jean says the key to reducing high turnover rates and burnout amongst counselors north of 60 is to train healthier counselors.
If you've done the work on yourselves, you're not going to be triggered. You're not going to be, I guess, not know what to do. So you're just like, okay, I went through this trauma. I know what it's like. I've dealt with these, and now when a client comes and has a similar problem, you can walk through it.
There will be 6 3-month semesters, 4 in Yellowknife and the last 2 in Vancouver at Rhodes, for students to finish their practicums in a clinical setting.
One of the big prizes really is to be part of the Canadian Professional Counselors Association of Canada, and once you achieve that designation, it really opens a lot of doors. And so, I mean, there are a lot of counselors in the Northwest Territories, Indigenous counselors, but, you know, they've received a little bit of training here, a little bit of, I mean, for a lot of them, they receive some training here, some training there kind of thing.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Great work. That's your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for In Focus with Melissa Ridgen. Stick around. Face to Face is up next. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.